Okay guys, so this is my first tutorial that I've done publicly. I've gotten so many requests for it and I wanted to go ahead and do it. So these are the things that you will need. You'll need a metal mixing plate, alcohol activated palettes. I like to use the Skin Illustrator palettes, as you guys can see. This flesh tone palette is probably my favorite, especially the Rose Adjuster. This is optional, but I like the Maron Bruise palette ring. It comes in handy for everything. Acetone to kind of help blend. Any kind of squirt blood. I'm using Maron. 99% alcohol, a fluffy brush just to kind of get your colorless powder on there. Now this is an old Lush dry shampoo. I never threw it out. I just wanted to use it. Some extra flesh if you need. You'll see me use this later on. It's not necessary. And I'm using 3rd degree silicone, A and B. This stuff is not the easiest to work with, but I definitely feel like with practice you can really do some cool stuff with it. And you're going to take your metal plate and you're going to put equal parts A and equal parts B on the plate. It's really important to note that you absolutely cannot mix these two together unless they are already on the plate. Do not contaminate either, or it will mess up your product and it will turn into a disaster. I admittedly don't really measure out my 3rd degree silicone. I sort of eyeball it and it's worked for me. I'm sure you could, measure it out and it, turn out perfectly fine. But I mean, if you eyeball it, I don't think it's going to really be that big of a deal. I find that A is a lot more of a loose consistency versus the B. The B is definitely more of like a thick, chunky consistency. As you guys can see, I'm having a hard time getting it out. And, it's funny because it has taken me a very long time to really master this product. And I wouldn't even say I've really mastered it so far. Also, I don't know what I'm doing there. Oh, I think I was wiping my my metal spatula, which you will also need to mix this, or you can use a popsicle stick, whatever floats your boat. And you're going to mix these two products together until you get kind of like it's going to be a goopy consistency. I think one of the challenges with 3rd degree silicone is the fact that working it onto your skin, it's very malleable. And by malleable, I mean it's very loose. And the whole purpose of 3rd degree silicone is to create, wounds. You can create, you'll see with this, you can create like holes in the skin, different things. And so one of the challenges is that you have to work with it relatively fast. I wouldn't say as fast as gelatin, but you have to work with it in such a way that you almost have to have a preconceived notion of what you're going to do on your body. And since I already know what I'm going to do, it's not difficult for me to really work with it. And I think if you are a first-time special effects makeup artist and you really want to learn the craft, I think this is a great tool to use, but I think that it takes a lot of practice. And again, like I've said, I don't think that I am a master of it by any means, but I do think that I've gotten to a point now where, I respect the product and I know the nature of the product. And so it's not really difficult. I mean, like I said, it's not the easiest to work with, but it's not the hardest anymore. And I think once you get the hang of it, you can really do some really cool stuff. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some acetone, which nail polish remover will work just as well too, but I like using straight acetone. And acetone, if you put it on the 3rd degree silicone, it'll kind of help smooth out the edges a little bit. And obviously I messed up on this quite a bit. Even though I am really happy how this turned out, I definitely feel like I have a lot to learn. And The acetone, like I said, it helps kind of blend the silicone into your skin, because as you guys can see right there on the side of my hand, there's like a drip kind of look to it, and I obviously don't want that, because it looks obvious. It looks like you've got just silicone kind of hanging on your hand. And so I like to kind of take acetone and just help blend the edges out a little bit. And you don't necessarily have to do this. I just feel like it's just, in the long run, I think it's easier. And I obviously got some silicone in between my fingers. I use a little too much here, I'm not gonna lie, but I kind of got nervous. So yeah. And so the next step that we're going to do, this is where it's kind of a pain in the ass, I won't lie. So to work with third-degree silicone, as I mentioned before, you kind of have to work fast. Although I have noticed lately, every time I work with third-degree silicone, it's not as fast as I initially thought. But that also depends on how much product you have on too. And since I have a lot of product on my hand, it's going to take a lot longer to set. And so what you want to do with your silicone is you want to start building the base or the design of your wound. And since this is going to be hyper focused on the bones and the tendons and the top of the hand, I just want to go ahead and create a circular wound to kind of illustrate the insides of this part of the hand. As I mentioned, this takes a lot of practice and a lot of patience, and until your silicone starts to harden, you're going to be doing this for a while. And my camera fell right there, so I had to put my camera back up. And so we're back, and I'm still going around and trying to set up the edges of the silicone, and as you guys can see, it starts to harden. It just takes time, but I think that this is a really important step when building your wound, because how you build the edge is really important. And for me, when I do wounds, I really like to emphasize the edges. And I took a brief moment off camera to kind of wait for this to set, and as you guys can see, the edges are starting to set really pretty. And I like to take my metal spatula and kind of go under the edges that I've created, but not too much to where I'm pulling up the product, because you can actually pull the product up if you're not careful, especially since I don't like to use fixative or any kind of spirit gum or Prozaid. I just kind of freehand it, no pun intended. So for me, I have to be extra careful because I can pull my product up, but as you guys can see, if you're super careful, you can really shape some great edges with this, which is why I wanted to use third-degree silicone and not scar wax, because I don't feel like scar wax is as realistic as third-degree silicone. So that's my own prerogative, and I'm sticking to that. So, okay, once you have your silicone kind of molded and you're pretty happy with how things have turned out, you can now start to go in with your Q-tip, which I think I forgot to mention that you'll need Q-tips. I have pulled off the cotton part of my Q-tips, and I have just left the main form of the Q-tip. And so since I know how I wanted my edges, I also wanted to do something where it just wasn't laying on the skin. And I feel like a lot of the times with this special effect, a lot of artists like to kind of lay the Q-tip on and without kind of blending it into the wound. And so what I did is the edges that I created with the silicone, I've actually tucked the Q-tip underneath, and that's made it easier for me to kind of, work around it. And I feel like with a wound like this, you're not going to just have your bones sitting on top of your skin. It doesn't make sense. And so I wanted to kind of help really just make the wound look better. Okay, so obviously when working with silicone, you're going to end up having excess product. And so since I used way too much product, as I mentioned before, I'm taking some of that extra silicone that I have left on my metal plate. And this is where I really wanted to work in detail and just make this look extra meaty and juicy and gross. And so I'm taking my excess product and I'm just going over the top of the Q-tips to blend them into the skin so they don't look so obvious. And I'm just kind of letting it do its own thing. I'm not really sort of going for anything here except for, just creating, lumps and bumps and tendons. And you guys will see coming up here soon how I'm kind of utilizing everything that I can possibly get my hands on. And to go back to what I was saying before, the cotton part of the Q-tip I kept just to kind of start building in some textures. This isn't necessary. You don't necessarily have to do this. I kind of saw this from an artist on YouTube and said, okay, well, I've got the product, might as well not waste it. And I'm really big on waste. Hence why I would suggest if you're going to use third-degree silicone and you have too much product, try and incorporate it into whatever look you're using. And I know sometimes you unfortunately can't, but with this kind of special effect, I think that, using every product you have and using what you have is what makes a wound or a practical effect look good. And so, as you guys can see, I'm starting to sort of just shape what's inside my hand. Since this is supposed to be what you could perceive as like an animal or a human that has just torn everything completely out of the hand, there really has to be no definitive shape with this. I think it's important to kind of create the texture, but I wouldn't go too crazy on this part, especially if you're working with silicone like I am. Scar wax, I could probably see being a little more detailed since it does have, it's a little more of obvious, whereas silicone is it's a clear consistency, and so it's not really necessary. So I'm just going in and kind of making everything look really super nasty. Now, this is where I tend to go overboard, and you absolutely do not have to do this step. In fact, I would probably advise against it unless you're super OCD like I am and drive yourself insane. So I decided to, knowing me, going big or go home, use some of the Ben Nye liquid latex that I have. In fact, I bought way too much of this for the TV show coming out next year, and I didn't realize it. So I have too much of this. So might as well use it. And what I'm doing is I'm just layering liquid latex around the wound. Again, I really don't think this step is necessary. I just wanted to create more textures. And does this really make a difference? I don't know. I just felt like, why not? But I'm kind of going in and I'm kind of layering it all over the wound just to kind of, I guess, keep things in place too, because not that it wasn't in place, but this really just kind of helps solidify the Q-tips. And this is the reason why I wanted to use it most of all, is because this motion, I'm creating nurnies, which, if you're very familiar with Gary Tunnicliffe from Hellraiser, he was a big fan of creating nurnies. And so nurnies, you're just basically taking liquid latex and you're kind of rolling it. The friction between your finger and the plate kind of creates like little strands of liquid latex. And so that's really why I wanted to use this more than anything. As I mentioned previously, I wanted to kind of get some tendon action going on in there. And so with this kind of motion, you're creating these little strands. And I think that this is really my favorite part of how this whole thing turned out, is because those nurnies make everything look super realistic. So Okay, so obviously this is where I realized I kind of messed up, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I totally half-assed this, and I would not recommend doing this just because I simply panicked. So I realized in the midst of working my third-degree silicone out, I did not create a deep enough I guess base is the word, for the bones near the wrist. And so, of course, I panicked and I took rolled up toilet paper and mixed it with liquid latex just to kind of create more depth. Now, again, I would not do this. I mean, you can, but I just sort of didn't like this. This is probably my least favorite part of the wound altogether. So I'm just trying to basically create more depth, and you guys will see later on that I kind of just hid this. And I think that's one of the most, cool things about special effects is that, if you mess something up, you have the ability to hide it to however you want. And so you guys will kind of see later on how I just ended up hiding this thing altogether. Okay, so once you pretty much have everything you want, this is a really important step. It takes away all the shine, and I feel like it just kind of helps colors and alcohol activated paints and grease paints stick better to you. But you're going to take a baby powder or a colorless powder. In my case, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I am using an old dry shampoo from Lush. I don't know if that's okay, but I'm using it and I use it, and honestly, it works out just as well as any of the Maron colorless powder that I've ever used. So you're going to take a fluffy brush. I'm just using one that I bought at Walmart, and I'm just kind of going in and just buffing out all that shine and excess kind of stickiness that is on the prosthetic. Well, not prosthetic, but you know what I mean. So you can really do this as much as you want or as less as you want, just as long as you have basically everything, dry. I think that you should be good in terms of putting your powder on. Okay, so now we're going to do the fun part, or the part that I like the most. So I'm going to go in with my Skin Illustrator Flesh Tone palette. I absolutely love this palette so much. I think it's my favorite palette in my kit, and I think that a lot of people will probably agree with you. It's just so universal, and you can do whatever you want with this palette. You can make veins, you can do flesh tones, you can adjust skin tones. It's really such a fantastic palette, and I highly recommend you get it if you don't have it in your special effects kit. So what I'm doing with this is I'm just putting a wash on this, and a wash is just mostly, I would say, I'm just throwing a number out there, but I'd say like 90% alcohol, 10% the color. Obviously, I messed up and added way too much color here, and I know it doesn't look that good, so I had to use a lot of alcohol and just kind of tame it down a little bit, which you absolutely can do if you end up using too much of your color. You can go in with alcohol and just sort of kind of buff it out. And normally I'd be using a brush, but I'm pretty old school and I like to use my fingers. I think that when you're doing a wash on special effects wounds, I think using your finger is the best tool, because you're going to use your finger anyway, or at least, I do, especially when dealing with skin tones and things of that nature. Just using your finger kind of gives you a feel for how light or dark a color is. And so I'm going in with my finger and just putting this wash on with the rose adjuster, which is the best. Okay, so now I'm going in with I think it's called rice paper. I'm not sure, but this is another color that I love in this palette because I'm pretty pale, and I think with this color and the rose adjuster, it just looks really good on my skin, and I like it. And I don't really think this is necessary, especially since you're going to be covering a lot of this anyway, but steps. So I'm just going in with this rice paper color. I think it's rice paper. I don't remember. I'm doing the same thing, putting on a wash mostly, and just kind of adding some color and depth to the outside of the wound. now once you pretty much have your, your base colors, whatever you want to do, this is where we're going to go in and start using our brushes and stuff. Now, I use the Delium tools, which I think they're fantastic. If you've got the extra coin, it's so worth it. You can use whatever paintbrushes that you have. I mean, you can go on Miron's website. Camera Ready Cosmetics has some really great brush selections on there. However, I am a Delium snob. These brushes have changed my life drastically, and they're a little bit pricey. I think I paid well over $100 for mine, but oh my God, they are the absolute best. This brush in particular that I'm using, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it is universal. You can use it for glue. You can use it for getting into hard to reach areas of your special effects wound. And as you guys can see, those edges that we created earlier on in the video, I'm just kind of going in with the rose adjuster and the darker brown color, mixing those two. And I'm just starting to create the depth for the wound. And this is really important, and this is why I emphasize just be really patient with third degree silicone, because the edging is really what makes this wound. And so with this particular brush, or again, you can use whatever brush you want, just as long as it is it's a little bit of a thinner brush. You go under the edging and just really start creating the dark colors, and I can't say enough about how great these brushes are. They're so fantastic. And then you are going to, this is pretty much your discretion. I really just kind of have fun with this, but you're going to go in and start creating like the fat colors, the tendon colors, just going in and really having fun with this wound. And so I pretty much used a mishmash of just different colors. I think at one point later on in the video, I used a blue or something like that. So I like to use a mix of different mediums, and this is just one of those products that I feel like everybody needs in their kit, and this is the Miron Bruise Ring. And especially if I'm doing like fat colors and stuff, I just prefer this. I know that a lot of people would argue and say that doing like a lighter yellow would probably work, and I'm sure it will, but this hasn't let me down yet. And I find that using the kind of grease paint against the alcohol activated paints, it's just like, I don't know, I'm just really a big fan of it. So I'm going in with that Miron Bruise Ring and just kind of touching up a little bit some of the fatty areas, so to speak. And I just think they look so good. And now I'm going in with some of the peachier tones, brown tones, and I'm just kind of starting to stipple in and color the inside of the hand. And again, a lot of this is going to be covered up, but I think I just really like to pay attention to detail. And I feel like with a human hand, you're going to have all different colors of browns and reds and peaches and yellows and stuff. And so this is where I'm just kind of creating the base color for that wound. All right, so once your colors are set and you're happy with how everything looks, this is where you're going to start using your fake blood. Admittedly, I really don't like this blood. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I think this Miron Squirt blood is not that great. I'm using it because, admittedly, I have very little left in my kit, especially after coming back from New York. I left most of my product there for Dennis and Bethany, but I mean, it works. It's just my biggest complaint is that it's too orangey, and I feel like while pink tone bloods look bad, orangey tones can look bad. And so that's just my thoughts on it. If I had a choice, I would be using the Skin Illustrator Fleet Street Blood. It is fantastic. It dries beautifully. It's got a great shine, and it's just fantastic. So I'm just kind of going with what I have. And so I'm going in with that blood, and I'm just kind of creating, I'm not going too crazy with it. I'm actually taking a stippling sponge and I'm just kind of going around the outside of the wound just to kind of give it a little more depth and to kind of blend it in with my skin. You don't have to use a stippling sponge, but I think that they're a good product and I think they're a good tool to have to kind of help blend in and make that wound set a little more into your hand. And so that's why I'm doing this. Also, too, pay attention to where your blood runs and drips, because that has a lot to do with how realistic your wound looks. For me, I like to really put blood kind of in where the edges are, because I feel like that's where a lot of where the source of that blood is coming from. And to kind of help with that, this is another palette that I absolutely think you should own if you don't. This is the Skin Illustrator, one of the blood palettes. And oh God, this is actually the first Skin Illustrator palette that I bought. And I gotta tell you, this thing has never let me down. And I've created a lot of looks with this palette. I think that on its own, it creates more realistic blood than even fake blood. And that's my opinion, and I am sticking to that. Okay, so this is where I kind of realized I severely messed up the bottom of the hand, and I was looking in the camera going, holy shit, that looks horrendous. So this is where I improvised, and this is where I thought, okay, well, let me just put a tissue on top of it to make it look like I'm kind of tending to the wound. And obviously it works. And so that's what I went with. And I tried to remedy the situation, and you guys will see what I tried to do. Now it looks good when you don't see that ugly thing at the bottom of my hand, but you guys will see what I tried to do to kind of remedy the situation. Okay, so this is called Extra Flesh, and I'm not really quite sure how I feel about this product. I have it, and I'm not gonna not use it since it costs money, but I just don't really understand the purpose of it. It's supposed to kind of be along the same family as Scar Wax. However, I feel like this is way more sticky and way more erratic, which is why I'm not really a big fan of it. However, I thought that if I added Extra Flesh onto the bottom, that it would make it look better. And now it kind of does, because it definitely blends into my skin tone more. But again, this is not necessary, and I would probably not tell you guys to do this unless you were absolutely desperate. But I mean, from this angle, it actually doesn't look that bad. So now that I've tried to remedy the situation, I'm kind of just going back in with all my blood products, and I'm just kind of grabbing tissues and stuff and just kind of dabbing the wound and really just kind of being a little bit gratuitous and just trying to blend in that faux pas at the bottom, which actually from this angle, it really doesn't look that bad, does it? And until I say something and you notice it. But this is just me kind of touching everything up and making everything look gross and grimy and things like that. So for the final touches, again, I'm very low on product, and I'm using probably the cheapest, crappiest blood you can probably get. But I mean, I guess it serves its purposes, and it looks okay. I'm not mad at it necessarily, but I'm just using this really crappy vampire blood that I bought on Amazon years ago and kind of putting a little more detail into the wound. I will say, I think that this blood is a better quality than even that Miron Squirt blood, because it's darker, it's a little more veinous, whereas the Squirt blood just looks like orange, and I'm not into it. So I will say that this blood kind of saved the day. It created a lot more depth and a lot more realism, so I'm pretty happy with that. However, like I said, if you're gonna go for anything, please opt and spend a little more and go for the Skin Illustrator Fleet Street. You will not be disappointed about using that blood, and it just looks so much better. All in all, I think it was actually a pretty good look. I'm pretty proud of how it turned out, even if it kind of was a little bit of a disastrous experience at some points. But I mean, I think that it's definitely doable. I think it takes practice with anything, and I'm sure even down the road I'll probably recreate this and end up doing a better job. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Honestly, I had a lot of fun doing it, and I should do more public tutorials, but number one, I'm lazy, and number two, I kind of forget to do it. But all in all, this is the look. I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and comment or let me know what you think, and I'll be happy to comment back. Thank you guys.